Hi guys, welcome back to the second video for our lecture. This will be the fourth and the final section for the day, which is curve sketching. So before we sketch curves, let us first list some steps that will guide us later on. And katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, gagamitin natin yung mga concepts na natutunan natin for the first three sections dito sa pag-sketch ng curve. Okay? Step 1 would be to find the first and second derivatives. Second will be to solve the critical points and the possible points of inflection. So, kukunin natin yung mga zeros ng f prime at f double prime or kung saan sila nag-undefine. And then sa step na to, kunin na rin natin yung functional value at those x coordinates. Next, we make a table of signs for f prime and f double prime. So, in this case, pagsasamahin na natin sa isang table yung parehong signs ng f prime and f double prime. Hatiin natin yung interval natin based doon sa nakuha nating critical numbers and possible points of inflection. Next, we determine if f is increasing or decreasing. So, dito, based nga dun sa ating section 1, we use the sign of f prime. If f prime is greater than 0, then it is increasing. If f prime is less than 0, then it is decreasing. Next, we check the concavity. So here we use the sign of f double prime based on section 3. If f double prime is greater than 0, then it is concave up. If f double prime is less than 0, then it is concave down. Next, we identify our special points. We begin with identifying all relative extrema. So, check natin yung mga critical numbers. We use FDT or SDT. For FDT, i-check natin kung nag-change yung sign ng ating F prime. Or for SDT, titignan naman natin yung sign ng ating second derivative. Next, we identify all points of inflection. So, titignan naman natin dito yung ating PPOIs. We will check if F double prime changes its sign. Then, after completing our table, we can now graph our function. And we start with plotting and labeling important points. So, by important points, I mean the relative extrema and the points of inflection. Dito, pwede nyo ring ilagay yung y-intercept para mas maging accurate yung graph kasi most of the time, yung y-intercept ay madali lang naman po nun. You just let x to be equal to 0. And based on the information that we have from step 4 and 5, we can now use that to graph the rest of our function. Okay, so let's do that. Now we can start graphing our first curve. For 1, we have this f of x equals x cubed minus 9x squared plus 15x minus 12. Okay? Nandito na rin pala sa right side yung shortened version ng ating mga steps para maging guide sa atin sa pagsasolve. Let's start with the first one. We have f prime and f double prime. So we solve that. F prime of x here is 3x squared minus 18x plus 15. Okay, polynomial lang. And then, ang f double prime natin ay magiging derivative nito 6x minus 18. Okay? So, yung second step natin will be to get the critical points and the PPOI or the possible points of inflection. Kung mapapansin natin, itong dalawang derivative natin ay never mag-undefine. So, therefore, ang CPs at PPOIs lang nila ay kung saan 0 itong dalawang derivative. Okay? In other words, we want to get the zeros of these two. And we can do that by factoring them completely. So, start with f prime. I can factor out 3. So, this will be x squared minus 6x plus 5. And I can factor it furthermore as x minus 1 times x minus 5. Okay? So, we equate this to 0. Therefore, the zeros of our f prime are x equals 1 and x equals 5. Okay? Now, for f double prime, this is equal to 6 times x minus 3. And then we can equate to 0. Hence, our 0 of f prime is 3. Okay? So, for the second step, ilagay na rin natin kung ano yung functional value at this x coordinates. So, ibig sabihin kukunin natin si f of 1, si f of 5, at si f of 3. Okay? So, I will leave it to you to verify yung mga functional values kasi isa-substitute nyo lang naman sila sa f. Okay? So, ibibigay ko na yung mga functional values. F of 1 is negative 5. F of 5 is negative 37. And f of 3 is negative 21. Okay? So, therefore, we now have our critical points that will be at x equals 1 and at x equals 5. So, ang critical points natin ay 1, negative 5. Ito yun. At 5 with y coordinate negative 37. At ang ating PPOI ay isa lang, 3 with y coordinate negative 21. Okay? For number 3, we will make the table of signs. So, again, magkasama na dito ang f prime at f double prime. And hahatiin natin ang intervals natin based doon sa magkasamang zeros ng f prime at f double prime. So, that will be at 1, 5, and 3. Okay? So, dito natin sila hatiin. We start with the lowest x coordinate here, that's 1. So, the first interval is at negative infinity to 1. Katulad ng ating table kanina, we also include the critical numbers and PPOIs in our table. So, meron silang separate column. So, we put 1 here. After 1, we have 3. So, that's 1 to 3. Then, 3. Then, after 3, we have 3 to 5. Then, we have 5. Then, we have 5 to positive infinity. Okay? Our first row would correspond to our f of x. And ang i-fill up lang natin dito ay ang functional values ng ating mga special x coordinates here. So, f of 1. So, maganda na nakuha na natin siya sa second step. Here, we have f of 1 to be negative 5. F of 3 equals negative 21. And f of 5 equals negative 37. Okay? So, for the second part of our table, we will write the factors of f prime. That's x minus 1 and x minus 5. So, take note, hindi na natin sinasama yung 3 kasi nga, positive naman siya. Positive constant siya, so it will not affect the sign. So, we have here f prime of x to be equal to 3 times x minus 1 times x minus 5. Okay? Start tayo sa row ng x minus 1. This is linear. May positive leading coefficient siya. So, gagamitin natin yung technique. Ang 0 nito is at 1. So, ilalabel natin ito as 0. Then, lahat sa left ay negative. Lahat sa right ay positive. Okay? How about for x minus 5? Linear. Ang 0 niya ay 5. Moreover, ang leading coefficient ay positive. So, lahat ng nasa left ng 0 ay negative. At lahat ng nasa right ay positive. Okay? Again, 3 is a positive constant. The sign of f prime will wholly depend on the sign of the product of this one. So, you have here, negative times negative to be positive. 0 times negative to be 0. Tas same lang siya, no, for the whole row. We have negative here, negative here, negative here, 0 here, and positive here. Okay? So, that will be the summary of our signs for f prime. Punta naman tayo sa f double prime. Ito yung f double prime natin. Kung makikita natin, hindi natin siya need na ihimayin kasi ang 6 natin ay positive constant. So, magdedepend lang siya doon sa sign ng x minus 3. So, pwede na nating idiretso ang f double prime. Our f double prime is 6 times x minus 3. X minus 3 is linear. It has positive leading coefficient. So, we get the 0. It's a 3. Everything to the left is negative. and everything to the right is positive. Okay? Lastly, yung last row natin dito would be steps 4 to 7. So, ilalagay natin dito ay graph of f of x. Sa row na to, ide-describe natin yung flow ng ating graph on certain intervals or kung special points ba yung mga x coordinates natin dito. Okay, we start with number 4. We determine if it's increasing or decreasing. So, ang titignan natin ay f prime. Kung positive yan, increasing. Kung negative, decreasing. So, at negative infinity to 1, you have positive. So, this is increasing. At 1 to 3, you have negative. So, we have decreasing. At 3 to 5, we have negative. So, that's decreasing again. And at 5 to infinity, it's positive. So, increasing. Okay? So, kung concave up or concave down naman, we look at the second derivative now, the signs of the second derivative. If negative, concave down. If positive, concave up. Here we have negative, so that's concave down. Negative again, then we have concave down. Then positive, we have concave up. Positive again, we have concave up. So, we already determined the monotonicity and the concavity of our curve at this specific intervals. Next, we check which are the relative extrema. So, kung relative extrema, ang titignan natin ay critical numbers, zeros ng f prime, sa 1 at saka sa 5 tayo titingin. Start tayo sa 1. We can use FDT or SDT here. Let me use SDT first. So, at x equals 1, our f prime is 0, and our f double prime is negative. So, by SDT, we have a relative maximum. You can verify that using FDT. At negative 1, sa left niya, meron kang positive, so increasing, tapos bumaba siya sa right, you have negative. So, tama na rel max. Okay, so again, you can use FDT or SDT. For x equals 5 naman, we have f prime is 0 and f double prime is positive. Hence, by SDT, you have a relative minimum. Okay? Lastly, we check the PPOIs if they are the points of inflection. Tingin tayo sa 3. To the left of 3, you have negative, and to the right, you have positive. That means your graph changes from concave down to concave up. Hence, this is indeed a point of inflection. Now, nakumpleto na yung table, pwede na tayo mag-graph. Okay, let's say we have this Cartesian plane. So, mas nilakihan ko yung sa ilalim na part kasi lahat ng special points natin ay may negative na y coordinate. So, we start plotting the extrema and the POI. We have 1, negative 5. Okay, so that's here. And tansyahin na lang natin here. Okay. So, let's say this is 1, negative 5. I-label din natin siya. We also have 3, negative 21. So, let's say somewhere here. So, pwede nyo na lang tansyahin. And lastly, we have 5, negative 37. So, that will be below this. So, maybe somewhere here. Okay. So, 5, negative 37. Okay? So, additionally, pwede rin natin ngang isama yung y-intercept para lang mas accurate. Ang y-intercept natin will be at x equals 0. Kung babalik kayo sa function, magiging 0 lahat except dito, matitira ay negative 12. So, ang y-intercept natin ay 0, negative 12. So, let's say somewhere in between here. Okay, let's say that this is that point, 0, negative 12. Okay? So, we can now graph the rest of the curve based on the last row of our table. Pero before that, Note ko lang na meron kang apat na pwedeng combination yan. You can have this, this, or this, and this. Okay? So, guide lang naman natin to. This would be increasing concave down. This is decreasing concave down. This one is decreasing concave up. And this is increasing concave up. Okay? So, we have 4 choices here. So, ito yung magiging guide natin sa pag-graph. So, from negative infinity to 1, that's to the left of 1, you should have increasing concave down. So, that should look like number 1 here. So, parang ganyan. Okay? How about from 1 to 3, meron tayo yung decreasing concave down based sa ating table. That would look like number 2. Pababa na concave down. So, something like this. And from 3 to 5, you have decreasing concave up. Pababa na concave up. That's number 3 here in our pattern. So, somewhere like this. And then, from 5 to positive infinity, you have increasing concave up. So, pataas na concave up. So, tataas lang siya. And you can verify kung tama yung extrema at POI natin. At x equals 1, tama, meron tayong relative maximum. At 3, we have POI. It changes from concave down to concave up. And then at 5, we have a relative minimum. Okay? Hence, this is the graph of our function x cubed minus 9x squared plus 15x minus 12. Okay? Now, let us move on to number 2. We have this new curve, negative x cubed plus 3x squared minus 2. Okay? First step, get f prime. That will just be negative 3x squared plus 6x. Okay. And f double prime is negative 6x plus 6. Right? Hindi sila ulit mag-undefined pareho, so we just get the 0. Factoring this out, I can factor out 3x. So this equals plus 2. And let me rewrite this as 3x times 2 minus x. Pareho lang naman. Rearrange ko lang. Therefore, our zeros here are 0 and 2. Okay? For the second derivative, I can factor out 6. So this will be negative x plus 1. Let me rewrite this as 6 times 1 minus x. Therefore, our x here will be equal to 1. So, ito lang yung zeros. So, ito lang yung zero ng ating f double prime. Next would be to get the coordinates. So, we get the functional value. So, f of 0. So, ito ibibigay ko na lang uli. I will leave it to you to verify. Yung mga functional values, substitute lang. F of 1 will be 0. And f of 2 will be equal to 2. Okay? So, therefore, we have the critical points as 0 to negative 2. Tapos, at x equals 2, ang y coordinate ay 2. And the only PPOI is at x equals 1 with y coordinate 0. Okay? So, this will be our CPs and PPOI. Next, table of signs. We divide our interval with 1, 0, and 2. So, start tayo sa 0. Negative infinity to 0. 0. Tapos 0 to 1. 1. Tapos 1 to 2. 2. Lastly, we have 2 to positive infinity. Okay? First row, f of x. Lagay natin functional values. F of 0 is negative 2. F of 1 is 0. F of 2 is 2. Alright. Next would be the factors of our f prime here. That would be x and 2 minus x. And let's write also the whole f prime. You have 3x times 2 minus x. Okay? X is linear. It has a positive leading coefficient. The 0 of x is 0. So everything to the left is negative. And everything to the right is positive. Okay, so 2 minus x, take note of this. This is linear, pero ang leading coefficient natin ay negative. We have negative 1 here. Or yung coefficient ng x ay negative. Therefore, magsiswitch yung pattern natin. Identify muna natin kung saan siya 0. 0 siya at x equals 2. Tapos baligtad ngayon, no? Positive naman yung nasa kaliwa. Okay? Again, if you want to test your signs, pwede naman kayong mag-test values. Okay? So now 3 again is a positive constant, so it will not just depend on the product of the signs of the factors. So you have here negative times positive, negative, we have 0, positive, 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 0, and negative. Okay? So this will be the signs for f prime. For f double prime, again 6 ay positive, so magde-depend lang siya sa 1 minus x. Pwede na idiretso ulit. 1 minus x has a 0 at x equals 1. It's linear, but the leading coefficient is negative. So therefore, switch uli yung pattern. Lahat ng nasa left natin ngayon ay positive. And lahat ng nasa right ay negative. Okay? And we are ready to describe the graph of f prime of f of x. Okay. Pwede na natin pagsabayin yung steps 4 and 5. Okay, for negative infinity to 0, you have negative f prime and a positive f double prime. So you have a decreasing concave up graph. Okay? Here, positive, positive. So you have an increasing concave up. Positive, negative. So you have increasing concave down. And lastly, both negative. So you have a decreasing concave down. Next, we check the critical numbers for identifying the relative extrema. The critical numbers first, x equals 0. F prime is 0. And our f double prime is positive, therefore by STT, we have a relative minimum. Next, at x equals 2, f prime is 0, f double prime is negative, hence we have a relative maximum. And to complete the table, we check the PPOIs, if they are the POI. So, ang PPOI natin ay 1, at x equals 1. So, at 1, tingnan natin ang sign ng f double prime sa kaliwa. Positive siya, sa kanan naging negative. So, you have concave up to concave down. Hence, it changes concavity. Hence, we have a POI here. We have already completed the table. And we can graph. Okay, so we plot the special points, 0, negative 2. 0, negative 2, so here. Okay, so this is 0, negative 2. Next, 1, 0. Here. Next is 2, 2. So this one. Okay. Before we graph, sulat uli natin, no? Yung 4 na cases. Okay, from negative infinity to 0, we have decreasing concave up. That should look like this, number 3. So it should look like this. And then from 0 to 1, you have increasing concave up. It looks like 4, pataas na concave up. Here, from 1 to 2, increasing concave down. That's 1. Something like this. And then from 2 to positive infinity, you have decreasing concave down. That looks like 2, pababang concave down. Okay, so let's verify. At x equals 0, we have a relative minimum. At x equals 1, we have a POI. It changes from concave up to concave down. And at x equals 2, we have a relative maximum. Hence, this is the graph of our function negative x cubed plus 3x squared minus 2. Okay, so that will be our examples for curve sketching. At ito pa ang more curves that you can graph on your own. Follow nyo lang yung steps na ginawa natin kanina. Okay? So, medyo mahaba yung lecture na ito. Sana nakasunod kayo at na intindihan nyo siya part by part. And please practice graphing these functions. Bye guys!